Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.
Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I'm Jeanne Thill, and on today's show, we're visiting with Father Joe Pins. He's the pastor at St. Francis of Assisi in West Des Moines, and he has a unique perspective of Father John Acrea, a beloved priest of our diocese who passed away. So we're going to visit with him about the impact he had on him and on the vocations for our diocese.
Really looking forward to hearing more of the stories, the oral tradition about Father Acrea, a beloved priest, not only at Dowling Catholic High School, but by so many, a holy priest. We won't start his cause for canonization right away, but I'm sure there would be many who would love to submit as part of that portfolio to do that. So here we are, Saturday the 13th. So much is happening. We know as well that we had Father Acrea's funeral yesterday. Tonight, we're looking forward to the Bishop's celebration of education, one of those grand annual events. And it really is a celebration more so than any kind of ask. Of course, we're always willing to enlist supporters and on the spiritual and the material level as well. Dr. Fisek from St. Albert alum, we interviewed her a couple weeks ago. So looking forward to hanging out with her in person and getting to know her passion, her vocation in healthcare. And that's there. And the Lofredo family, we're honoring them. We know that there's such a presence in the Des Moines Diocese, in the Des Moines area. Christ the King Parish in particular, their family has strong roots there, but those roots extend in many ways to touch many lives so as well. I'm going to shine a light on our special honorees. Our Teacher of the Year, Cindy Schwery, Shelby County Catholic School, long time presence there, much beloved. As long as she doesn't ask me to crochet or knit or anything, I'll be a happy camper, all right?
I don't know.
Erica Arnold, overseeing the academic side of things at Dowling Catholic High School, and so her presence as well, and professional expertise in the curriculum and far beyond that. And our Volunteer of the Year, Tomas Munoz, he's a member of St. Francis of Assisi, but all that he does for Holy Trinity Catholic School. And people who love them are going to be there, and it should be just a great festive evening. Maybe a little bit hot, but there you go. The air conditioning is working with our new chiller in the Pastoral Center last year, so all should be well. And Father Pins knows those woes as much. Today, the feast of St. John Chrysostom, a longtime bishop who suffered much in persecution, kind of that tension between East and West, but his preaching, his voice rings on. That famous reading from the Office of Readings, often enlisted as a kind of, unfortunately, iconoclastic thing to kind of, simplify. No, he is calling for the enhancement and beauty, as Father P.J. McManus was reminding me, of our worship and all that we are, and nobly lifting up and glorifying God in all his splendor. But at the same time, John Chrysostom says, what does the gospel enjoin us to do? So we can make gifts to support our churches, to beautify and sanctify them, but I'm demanding that along with such gifts, before them you give alms, he preaches. God accepts the former, but he's much more pleased with the latter. Of what use is it to weigh down Christ's table with golden cups when he himself is dying of hunger? First fill him when he's hungry, then use the means you have left to adorn his table. And similarly continues on with golden threads and claws and the food and everything and the food and drink that we're to offer. Looking forward to tomorrow. I mentioned Christ the King. I have confirmation later in the day. But first, the 150th celebration of Holy Cross Parish in Elkhart. So Father Ross Parker and the good people there will recognize another century and a half. Some of these parishes are hitting these marks. We were at St. Mary of Avoca in August. And so the founding parishes of our diocese, really, in so many ways, what a great celebration that will be on the feast of the triumph of the Holy Cross. No coincidence, I suspect, that that's the case as well. And I'm conscious of the words of an anonymous monk, so we can't attribute this to anyone directly. But as we think about the centrality of the cross in our spiritual lives and all that we're about, this anonymous monk says, you're to carry your crosses without bragging about them. Neither the grace supporting you nor the energy of your spouse can take away their painful character. Nature will go on whining and feeling the same repugnance for what is rending and crushing it, the same desire to flee from what interferes with it. The cross would no longer be the cross if it ceased to afflict. And so we don't just simply bear it, we resign ourselves, but ask for the grace of loving the cross of Christ so that we might be united evermore with Jesus and his mother who could not spare him the relief, give him relief as he suffered on the cross to save us.
And with that, Bishop, we need to take a break, and we'll be returning with Father Joe Pins, pastor of St. Francis of Assisi in West Des Moines, on the impact of Father John Acrea on his priesthood and vocations for the Diocese of Des Moines. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. On today's show, we're visiting with Father Joe Pins, pastor of St. Francis of Assisi in West Des Moines, on the impact of Father John Acrea on his priesthood and vocations for the Diocese of Des Moines.
It's so good to have you, Father Pins. You're a busy man with pastor of a small little parish in West Des Moines, St. Francis of Assisi.
I like to call it the small little parish on the west side.
But formerly at St. Joseph's on the east side, and many other roles and hats you wear. Also the canonical administrator for the Des Moines Catholic School region, and all the wonderful things that brings about. So you no extra pay for that in that role.
That's okay.
So
he gets extra grace.
It's extra grace. Working on my purgatory time, I think.
Yeah.
So, on this Making It Personal, we are using this show to really reflect on the life of Father John Acrea, all that he meant, the many young people and people of all ages that he's touched. I came to know him, but wished I'd had the opportunity to get to know him better, and somehow he was so busy sometimes we couldn't always make that work. But also a classmate of my uncle, Monsignor Ralph Symington, at the Archdiocese of Dubuque, who passed away last September. So I think the sole remaining, Father Jim Kiernan was also a member of that class. I think the sole remaining survivor is Father Frank Palmer, if I believe. So Father Acrea, how did you first encounter this beloved priest?
Well, Father Acrea was a teacher for me in high school. So when I was at Dowling as a student, Father Acrea taught a religion class. Actually taught us a little bit of philosophy, and which was really mind-blowing for a high school sophomore. But he was a very gentle man, a man that shared his faith. He definitely had the faith. Definitely, when I was a senior at Dowling, went to Tech, Teens Encounter Christ retreat, and he was a big part of that as well, and helping us seniors to realize our faith and bring that alive. I do remember a couple of times when he was just always there. And then also, the thing too about Father Acrea, I had him as another religion class when I was a senior as well. And, he made sure that we went to confession. And so as a senior in high school, I remember going to confession, and it was just a poignant kind of time in a young person's life. And then obviously, too, that's what he's been doing for the last 5-10 years, is just being available for confessions for these high school students at Dowling High School. And it's just a great way to remember him. I looked back at kind of his life and his obituary. He spent most of his priesthood at Dowling Catholic High School, and I think that's a testament to him and to really, trying to maintain that Catholic word in that title, Dowling Catholic. He really brought the faith and kept it alive in many different ways in the students and in the faculty.
You mentioned his gentleness as a gentle teacher. That sometimes we hear a priest that, earlier on they're young, zealous firebrands, and maybe there's a greater sternness once in a while, but that gentleness was always there. They mellow out. I once had a pastor who was a Catholic school administrator, and the description of him was not the pastor that I knew in his latter days, just really beloved. Yeah. But so there was no change in temperament, but a kind of constancy. Now, I heard, he was known to administer the jugs, the judgment under God at Dowling. Yes. So how do we kind of integrate these facets of his personality?
But I want to know, how many jugs did you get, Father Joe?
0. That is one of my big things that I look back at Dowling, and I never got jug.
On your resume, number one.
On my resume. Now, don't ask my classmates. But but that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Okay.
They got rid of all those records.
Yeah. Maybe for some of the clergy, they're in their secret personnel files. Those are there. But he would administer jugs, justice and mercy and grace in Christ, and he was able to do that, but not capriciously.
Correct. Like you said, he's got this gentle heart, but he also, wanted people to understand the faith and have that justice and understand what justice is and understand the glory of God's love and mercy. But as always comes with the other arm of justice.
So he held you to a standard. He called forth from you the kind of excellence that we'd want Dowling to continue to be able to do with students, not only in the academic performance, but in their personal comportment and who they are in that beautiful way. So,
Becoming that disciple that you need to be. You have to understand it all.
Was there a sense of humor? Did he help you laugh at yourselves, or was it more subtle?
He had like I said, he kind of taught a little bit of philosophy, and so he took this little pencil and asked the class, "What is this?" And we're all like, "It's a pencil. It's a writing utensil. It's And he's we're all trying to just guess. And he said, "It's an experience. It's an experience. You've experiencing this pencil in my hand." And it's that philosophy, but that sense of and obviously he's doing it also in that sense of humor, that sense of bringing alive what truly is going on in life, because we sometimes we just see, well, it's just a pencil, but he's trying to bring it into a deeper conversation of this experience that we're having in these classrooms.
So I'm sure that the professors in minor seminary appreciated that ground had already been turned over for many of you, as some of us were laboring in the trenches for a few years.
Well, I won't go into my philosophy in seminary.
Well, no, but that it's not merely subjective perception. There is something that we have that's a response to something beyond ourselves, and that this can be shared in common, even though it remains eminently personal in that way. So I'll try not to go off in la-la land here, waxing about philosophy that way. So. A young man, Missouri Valley, Iowa, and maybe what he was trying to impart to you is something, as I read his obituary, that was something for him, a kind of transformative experience in high school, reading The Quest for Happiness, that awakened his heart and set it on fire with love for Jesus, a fire which never abated in that way. So how did you sense that this is a man who was truly in love with Christ?
Like I said, he just had this love for students, but you can also see that he had that love for Christ. He had that prayerful moments. You can sense that prayer in him and that connection with God. And he tried to bring that alive in those theology classes, those religion classes, to get us to realize who Christ was, and to really, to see the wonder and beauty of God working in our lives. We kind of took a look at one of the things that he brought forward was the big lie of that I'm the center of the world, right? And you're in high school, that's the way you think. You think, I'm the center of the world. Everything revolves around me, and it only happens to me. And to have that sense that, no, it's Christ that's the center of the world. It's Christ that needs to be at the center of our lives, was brought forth in his classes.
Yeah, wonderful. You talk about him teaching religion or theology. They're not identical. I mean, one is kind of looking at religion as an object, theology presuming the assent to faith, to the God's self-revelation and all that's there. But also English. And it notes that, that would not have been his first choice. So his obedience and docility to Bishop Daly, getting the master's in education with a focus in English. And yet that became something that was very essential to who he was.
Yes. Yeah. He was a smart man, a well-read man. But he had that education, but he was also a man of recreation as well. And so you can just see the balance of life that he had in him.
Yeah. Debate team, was that something you participated in or not?
I did not.
Okay, all right.
I was not one of those smart people. I was in the band when I was in high school.
Oh, another facet here. Right. I think we've touched on this before.
You have to be smart to be in the band too.
Well, you just have to count to 4.
Oh man.
Oh no, Plato and Pythagoras would say there's the whole philosophy of mathematics here underlying everything as well. But he wasn't a kind of argumentative fellow by nature in any way, but he honed the skills. Obviously, they even claimed honors, at a state level.
Yeah. I mean, he had some great debate teams. I saw in the obituary that he had some state championships and came 5th in the nation. And I've talked to some of the old guard at Dowling, and one of them told me that Father Tom Ashman was one of his key students in the debate class back then, and so.
Wonderful Divine Word priest, now president of Divine Word College, has been for well over a decade, and that. So the tentacles of Father Acrea's education and teaching have reached around the world. How's that? Wonderful, and expecting Father Ashman yesterday's presence at the funeral mass, as well as many will come to be part of that. Parish assignments woven in, St. Pius X, Panora assignments, Guthrie Center, Creston, and Elkhart. Elkhart then became kind of his pastoral base, but this ministry, which strikes very close to home, your own heart, as vocation director. Yeah. So can you talk about, where you drew, was he a mentor to you, where you drew inspiration? And maybe once in a while you said, well, maybe that's not something I'm going to implement.
Right. Well, no, so he, so when I discerned into the seminary, he was the vocations director. So I discerned a little bit after college, thinking about all that, and then
a little accounting degree.
Degree, and working in on the Loop in Chicago and all that. But having that sense when I came back and having him just kept asking me things, and when he was that vocations director, whenever I was, it seemed like he had that touch, or he had the experience of the Holy Spirit to be able to make a phone call or send me a card at the right moment when I needed that affirmation, when I needed that sense of, oh yeah, I still need to be thinking about this. So I really do take a look at his life in that vocations work, getting me into the seminary. And then obviously...
Was he ever annoying, or was he ever eliciting your own ambivalence? And so there was, if not outwardly, an inward kind of pushback once in a while? He'd having these conversations and inviting me into these different events to try to get me to join the seminary, taking me to the seminary, taking me to these little retreat days, and inviting me to go deeper into my own faith. He just had a nice way of doing that with a pleasant smile, and just enjoyed that. And then obviously too, when Bishop Pates asked me to be the vocations director years later, I kind of went back and say, okay, what got me into the seminary? And I'm like, also Father Acrea. Father Acrea was, at the time, I believe he was working at St. John Vianney Seminary up in Minnesota as a spiritual director, and so I had some connections with him again, and just keeping that alive. And then I went to one of these national conventions of vocations directors, and introduced myself, trying to figure out what's going on, what vocation work's all about. And this other priest, this vocation director, comes to me and says to me, "Oh, you're from Des Moines, John Acrea. Yeah, he taught me everything I know." Really?
And so, I just kind of stuck with Father Acrea teaching me vocations work. And, I think with his prayer and teaching me how to pray for vocations was what we did and how we were successful in vocations work when I was there.
I mean, in some respects, he was kind of cutting edge, wasn't he? I mean, enlisting media and other things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, the websites that he founded, vocationsonline.com and things that were there. So going where the young people are, and meeting them in the means and the fora that were there. So very evangelical in that respect as well. You talk about his experience. I can remember my youngest brother, Tom, now an attorney living here in Central Iowa and everything else, members of All Saints Parish in Des Moines. But he was considering as an undergraduate at Iowa State, so there was frequent engagement, that went far beyond what we were about. And so ultimately helping Tom to discern that maybe not, when I thought he would be the one who would become a priest in this way. But so he's also familiar with the impact of media, not always for the better, but for the worse, and how it can be something that is noxious for our spiritual life and the flourishing of our souls. And yet, there was always going to be a gentleness, like you said, the good news, God's mercy, always inviting us, never causing us to shrink back in reproach, self-reproach, or anything that was there. I think that may be part of the hidden story for Father Acrea, known only to God and the angels, how much he brought peace and reassured young people, women and men, but I think particularly the men who sought him out at Dowling Catholic High School as well. Did he have any kind of endearing quirks or things that were about him? mean, he just, to me, he seems so gentle and always forthright. So
I think one of the big things, he loved to go fishing. He loved to go camping, and he always went up to Canada and did all these great things. So you would see him, and you wouldn't necessarily see an outdoorsman. But that's what he was. He really enjoyed the outdoors. He enjoyed taking his canoe and walking up and having a great time, with his friends up in Canada. I was not an outdoorsman, so I never experienced that side of him. But I think that side of him is definitely a big part of who he was.
Yeah, and that contemplative side, realized in nature, and this Harrison County boy, and in Minnesota as well. So wonderful.
We're going to take a quick break. I know it's always hard, but when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Father Joe Pins, pastor of St. Francis of Assisi in West Des Moines, on the impact of Father John Acrea, a beloved priest in our diocese. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen, and we want to thank the St. Sarah Club of Des Moines and the Sarah Club of Council Bluffs for sponsoring this show, and especially this show, because Father John Acrea was our chaplain for years when he was a vocation director for the diocese, and so we're especially grateful to them for their support.
No, blessings to the Sarahs, both in Des Moines, Central Iowa, and in Council Bluffs. They each have their own kind of unique profile even there, but wonderful support for not only vocations, the priesthood, but diaconate and religious life, and I think that's really kind of animated them, especially in recent years. But
Father Joe, I remember years ago when we would talk about vocations, and Father John Acrea would really emulate this too, that you aren't the only vocation director for the diocese, that it takes all the priests to do that. And I'm sure there are things that he did, that you did, that all the priests really should incorporate into their daily practices.
And all the moms and dads as well.
And all the moms and grandma.
And grandma.
Yes.
Yes. If you remember right, Grandma got Pope Francis into the seminary.
Oh.
So we're all vocations directors. But, Father...
Just speaking of popes, by the way, happy birthday, Pope Leo, tomorrow, right. Sunday the 14th. Turns 70 tomorrow. So
great.
70 is the new 55.
It's young.
Yeah.
I'm still younger than the Pope. 2 years, but hey.
But just the sense of that we're all working together. I think Father Acrea worked well with the Sarah clubs to get the message out, not just the message out to the young people, but to the parishes, and help bring about parish small groups to talk about what they can do, what each parish can do, putting things in the bulletins, putting things on bulletin boards, or whatever they could do to kind of just remind people, specifically young people, that God might have a call for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
he does.
Yeah.
Yes. One of three.
Thought about it, and I can see it in you. That I can see a priest in you, and that. Wait a minute.
Oh, yeah, that's scary.
I had a young man say to me once, "If I pray about that, will I be a priest?" And I'm like, if you pray about it, God will help guide you as to where you're supposed to go.
Right.
Like, he was afraid. He was like 12. If I pray about this, will it happen?
Will it happen?
Maybe I shouldn't pray.
Open your heart to something.
Right.
And God stirs those desires. And this is something, a constant theme, is that God isn't trying to impose something on you against your will here. God wants your fulfillment and happiness. This world doesn't offer us perfect fulfillment and happiness, and it also offers us the cross. And I think, that's something we're seeing. I don't know if Father Pins, if you're seeing a kind of turn where young men in particular are ready for something worthy to lay their lives down for.
Yes.
We also often think about the military or other the armed forces, but this is something for Christ that endures forever.
Right, and that's what the great mystery of the priesthood is all about, is like that laying down your life for the others, for the church, right? I mean, that's in the ordination, right? When you have the priests laying down prostrate, laying down their life for the church, for Holy Mother Church. But it's also just a sense of they're going to respond to this great mystery of Christ and his cross, as we're about to celebrate the triumph of the cross tomorrow as well. Carrying that cross and that triumph of the cross, and I'm going to lay down my life for something special, something great, and that's what priests do. And we definitely saw that in Father Acrea.
Yeah. Yeah, and that this will be your great joy, too. That's the Christian paradox, is that doing so, pouring ourselves out in love in that way. Just as for married couples, the cross is there. But, we're encouraging, as a kind of an additional feature, just a reminder, Father Ross Parker, Father Reed Flood, and Father Max Carson, our Associate Vocation Directors, to embrace, we think about Mary's closeness to her son, praying a 6th decade of the Rosary for vocations. And to do that, grandmothers, grandfathers, all of us, when we're in the car, to add that 6th decade of a Rosary to pray for vocations. Father Penn, so great to have you on. Thank you for your own model of priesthood, the way you live that out with joy and a certain steeliness at times with evangelical courage.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here today.
This has been another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. Thanks to our guest and to all of our listeners in Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, or wherever you may be listening to the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.